here. I don't, yeah.
We are going to go this way.
Right. Oh, we're fine. Yeah, I think he's okay.
Everything's so
It is a very harsh environment. It has its own beauty, but it is harsh. It's very, very different from, I mean, I grew up in the Northeast, so it's like being on Mars. And there's something about that that is compelling. And exactly what I don't know that I could tell you, but I can tell you I appreciate the space, just the physical space. I've always wanted to be part, like, natural ecosystems amaze me. The more you zoom in on like a coral reef, you see smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller stuff. And it's just this amazing web that's friggin' perfect. It works perfectly. Like man could only wish his shit was that good. What I like is that just by taking very common materials and actually common forms, there's nothing wild about this, you can combine them and make, in a way, make nature work for you or become a part of it. In a passive solar house. In order to maximize the benefits of the sun, you want a house that is rectilinear. And the long facade should be facing east-west, because if this house were rotated the other way, and interestingly enough, there's a crappy house right down the way that is rotated 90 degrees, like the worst possible position you could have. If you rotate it 90, it's just a simple move, and all of a sudden, you minimize your summertime exposure all afternoon and all evening, and you maximize your winter exposure. And then, in order to control the sun, you want to keep most of your glazing on the south side so that when the sun is low in the horizon in the winter, it will fill that space. And in the summer, the reason the eaves are as deep as they are is it shades the entire slab inside and keeps it shaded and relatively cool compared to the outside. The desert environment is just punishing, and there are not a lot of natural materials that can hack it out here. I mean, stone can, and concrete, and steel to a certain degree, and glass, but the UV out here is punishing. So at any rate, I dig concrete, and there's an awful lot of energy that goes into producing cement, but over the life cycle of the building, I think it can be offset because it's doing an awful lot of work, certainly internally as thermal mass. And that will last as long as anybody feels like maintaining the house. Let's see. The pool is an indulgence out in the desert, but my first draft of this house, there was no pool, and I thought if I just push this wall out and get a vinyl liner, I can get a pool out of the deal, you know, for just like nothing. So I thought, well, I'll just try it, and because I had never done a pool before. And I thought, well, if the pool tanks, then I'll just take the liner out and I'll make a deck out of it or a garden or whatever. But it worked out great, and there was a larger idea. It does create a slight microclimate in the area because we do get evaporation, and like clockwork, we'll have a breeze from the southwest in the summer evenings, and it'll come in and waft along here. And as it does so, the evaporation of the water cools the air in the immediate area. So as it comes through the house, it gets slightly cooler. So it is part of the cooling strategy. Yeah, we can come in. Yeah. In here, the other way of employing passive solar design is in the summer, we're completely shaded. The line of the sun is outside, so the slab is kept relatively cool compared to the outside. Typically what you would do is open the doors in the evening around probably 6, 7 o'clock, and again, we get that breeze and it wafts through all night long. It will just take all the heat that's built up throughout the day out, and the slab will get relatively cool. And then you close the doors in the morning, and the slab, which started cool, slowly gets warmer and warmer and warmer over the course of the day, and then you let it all out at night. The way it works, if you were here in the winter and it were noon, the sun would be flooding this space, and the slab would be absorbing all that thermal energy and storing it. And then as the sun set, it would feel warm on your feet, and it just slowly radiates out over the course of the night. And by the time all of the energy is sort of dissipated, the sun rises and it starts all over again. And it's just, there's a real, I don't know if you call it poetry or beauty or whatever, but in nature, nothing goes to waste. It's sort of like sailing a boat in a way. Like, I was always fascinated with sailboats because it's just your knowledge of wind and tide and things like that. It will take you wherever you want to go for free. And the house is like that. Like, once you know how the sun operates and moves throughout the seasons and how materials react to that, you can combine those and get wherever you want to go for free too. So all of these materials are where they are and what they are, largely for thermal mass purposes, like all of the slab, all of this concrete work, even the slate, all of that stores energy, stores thermal energy.
So you're even to the walls.
Oh, yeah. You're going to focus on the big error area? Sure. Bring it on. I did all that I could to make sure that every pour went well, and the most important pour in the whole damn project, it didn't go awry necessarily, but it was right on the verge of going awry. I was pouring in like July or August, and the concrete was starting to go off, and as I'm pouring it, this had started to go off, and you could see I was trying to, you put this big vibrating metal thing down into the concrete to agitate it and disperse it. It's called a vibrator, and you could see these are all from the vibrator where it hit the formwork actually and disturbed the color, I guess. And then this, it's not a cold joint, but it's damn near one. It's almost. I was doing all this myself, and if you've ever held a 3/4 inch thick 4x8 of plywood in 20-mile-an-hour winds, it acts a lot like a sail, and it just, and it's just not manageable. And I was like almost despondent. I was like, how the hell am I going to get this built?
So you've really built this house.
I designed and built all of it. Like, if you see it, I did it. Everything. I came out to Joshua Tree. I'd never been here before, and I saw how inexpensive things were at the time. The land was really cheap, and there wasn't much red tape. And it was really, there was a real stark beauty about the desert. And I thought, oh, I'll just buy a piece of land out here and do something, quick and get my feet wet and get going. And other than the quick part, that's how it worked out. That's what I did. When I got into it, I knew I was very particular, but I guess I didn't realize how much my expectations differed from your typical contractors. So I ended up just building the whole place myself, from driving the dozer to excavate to setting up the formwork, pouring the concrete, whatever, all of it, the cabinetry, the wiring, the everything. So it was really like a graduate school all over again from a technical perspective.
How did you learn how to do these things?
Well, I had done all of this stuff before, but this was the first one of this scale that I'd done everything. When I was younger, I built a cabin, and I was such a nerd, I would pore over it. When I was 10 and 12, we had this set of Time Life books, and one was like about wiring, and one was about framing and foundations, and I just pored over those. I built like a tree house, and then added a second story and the third story, and then built a cabin. We lived out in the sticks. Later I went to Arcosante, and there I learned how to form concrete and do heavier construction. And all the other stuff I had done piecemeal. It's been a weird trip though. When I was doing this, I was very, very solitary. Nobody else was here. Once in a blue moon, like for a huge beam, I'd get a helper for the day just to lift the beam in place, but that happened so rarely, 2 or 3 times maybe. Toward the very tail end of the, I was veering into, crazy prospector territory, just hammering away every day, doing my thing, and very, very isolated. I started, you better start seeing some people and getting back and talking to humans.
8 years is a long time.
Yeah, my only gripe is it took longer than I wanted, but other than that, it was a really great experience. I would say, of course, it costs less than having a contractor do it, but there's the opportunity cost of all those years of my life. What could I have been doing? But, it was its own education. Can you put a price on that? I'm sure you could.
I enjoyed it.
I wouldn't have done it otherwise. Yeah, it was in a way, a dream. It was just what I wanted to do. And not many people get to do that, so that's pretty great. I don't really like binary houses where you're either just fully inside or fully outside. That's part of the thinking behind this trellis and the roof. Like when I'm standing out here, it's clear I'm outside and out in the open and unprotected. But this sort of diffuses the edge of the roof so that when I'm under it, you start to get a general, very vague sense of enclosure from above. And once you're here, you have more of one. But as you walk toward the house, the roof pitches down and starts to compress the space vertically. And finally here you're starting to get a greater sense of enclosure, but still outside very clearly. And then you're finally inside. Right where the roofs meet is the demarcation between the public half of the house and the private half of the house. So you have a large opening here and the view. So it should be fairly clear that this is the main space. As you continue on, the hall gets narrower. So what happens past here is of lesser consequence than what happens here, or maybe is private. And then, as you'll notice, other than bathrooms, there are no doors in the house. That's intentional. It's to make it. I built it when I was still a bachelor, and it was just a bachelor pad. And I wanted, not unlike the desert, like a sense of expansiveness. But there is some flexibility too. Like we can, if we had guests, we could just pull this shoji screen out. And you get a limited amount of privacy, but probably adequate for overnight guests, or if you need some, privacy as if you're using it as an office or something, I don't know. But I like playing around with the idea of flexibility. Having said that, I never have used it, like not once. I never. So basically, as you walk in, you're compressed vertically to this point. And as you walk the length of the private space, the ceiling is continuing to go up. So ultimately, the payoff is this really nice, expansive view of the whole valley of Joshua Tree. You don't even see a power line here because I buried the power lines. They come from that pole way down there. And in fact, I tried to pay someone to trench, and he got 30 feet in and says, too hard, I can't do it. So I had to go get a trencher, and I trenched the whole damn thing and then put all the conduit in. And, you'll notice that it expands both vertically and horizontally. So you have this, a certain sense of confinement in the gallery or hall here, and then it expands both vertically and horizontally. And again, the outriggers or trellis continue on just to sort of diffuse that edge of the roof. So for a relatively small space, hopefully it won't feel terribly small. Like people routinely think the house is bigger than it is. I've never spent any time in here with that door closed.
Very Japanese in a way.
Yes, I had planned to use rice paper, of course, but I went with polycarbonate, much less prone to damage.
But it's still open.
Yeah, very open. Yeah, that's for, mostly thermal purposes, and not really meant to be, a place with a lot of cubicles or something. I've always liked pocket doors. I don't know how practical they are, but I've always liked them. Someday I'll actually put a latch on that. Not today, though. All the wood is vertical grain Douglas fir, so there's no rainforest wood or anything like that in the house.
Who did these doors? Wow.
Well, I designed and built all of it. Like, it all had to be figured out. It was a lot of work, but I loved it. I started doing as a furniture maker before getting into architecture. I enjoy it. And this is laundry and fire business And that I actually got a very circuitous route to architecture, paintings and paint. My undergrad degree was in classical guitar. Oh, this is the linen closet. In my last semester, I was like, oh boy, you got to go make a living now. And some books. So I got a job doing industrial design and product development, basically. I really didn't like that. And I started designing and building furniture. And then I started my own little design build furniture shop. And just, clothing closets, that's what the same all the way. So I just sort of jumped up in scale and started getting more interested in architecture. So from little things to furniture to houses. So it was no big deal to build all the cabinetry. I had that experience.
It looks like a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. It is a lot of work. That's one of the drawbacks, not a drawback, just realities. It's not an easy house to patch and fix. Like if it were drywall and carpet, who cares? It's easy to do. That's not the case with this house. And these doors still don't have handles. I always wanted something super clean, and I had originally specified these little round finger pulls. And then when push came to shove, I just couldn't cut into the door. I just didn't think they were nice enough. So they'll probably never have handles on them. I don't know. And if I were to do it again, I would probably just do a little strip coming off the whole edge or something, or I don't know. The doors, I actually economized because they have this thing called shop grade where there's something off about the panels, but you get like 30, 40% off. And since I was cutting them down to size, I ended up getting all these panels that were all skewed. The veneers were all not parallel. So all I had to do was cut them to size, and I saved a lot of money. I had to cut them anyway, so it didn't matter. These were all built with scraps from various stuff, all the kitchen cabinetry and stuff. I made those out of scrap. I had plans to do more furniture here, but again, reality intruded. Well, there was more economizing here, actually. I ordered these sliding doors. They were this brushed nickel, and there was a frame all the way around, and it looked like it had been dragged from the back of a car. It was so nasty. And again, no money, so what am I going to do? And so I sort of encapsulated the top in wood, replaced the other side pieces in wood, and polyurethane the daylights out of it. It's been just fine, actually. There's stories. 8 years, there's stories for everything here. Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway, there's stories, I guess. The house really served as a test bed, as like a laboratory for all things that interested me and that I'd wanted to try out. One of those things was concrete countertops. And it's one of the failures of the house, if you ask me. One of the hang-ups of countertops is how you seal them. One is a penetrating sealer, which soaks into all the pores and tries to prevent stuff from soaking in, basically. And then the other is a topical, like an epoxy, that just sits on top. And then the third is a new type. When I built this, it was just coming out, where you put it on and it actually reacts with the concrete itself and forms a impenetrable barrier. So this was an early test bed for that sort of technology, and it was a little frustrating because I was a bit of a guinea pig. And so what you see is it is kind of susceptible to acids. So you can see how acids really get to it. People seem to dig it, and they don't seem terribly put off. I like things looking clean. I'm not a huge fan of patina, but I have no choice here. Oh, and this is something, I made this island separate, so again, for sort of flexibility, you can rotate it and put it here, so you could rearrange this whole space so that it would be like an L shape here, and your bar would be here looking out, and then your dining table would go here. This light is on a different switch. And then you would have just a different layout, basically. This table, I had no money, and I had guests coming for Thanksgiving, and I needed a table, but I didn't have the time or the money or anything. So I went to Home Depot, got 2 hollow core doors. That's a door, and that's a door. This was like the main door, and then the other one I cut down and made legs out of, and I just had to figure out a way to reinforce the joint. And I don't remember exactly what on earth I did, but I reinforced it so that it was a very strong joint for a $40 table.
So you've really built this house.
Yeah.
Doing it yourself means
Yes.
doing
Everything. Yeah, everything. I am to a fault optimistic and underestimate the time things take. I'm always like, oh, it'll probably take me a year. And then I'm 2 years in, probably 6 more months. And you do that a couple times and you're in a few years.
But then you have a house
Then you have a
like.
Yeah, yeah.
Fix you.
I mean, how many people get to do that? Like, there are designers and architects that would kill to build a house of their own the way they want to do it. Yeah, like I had certain strictures, budget and saleability and things, but I basically got to do what I wanted to do, and it was its own education. I mean, that's awesome. Yeah, it took a long time. Guess I wasn't doing anything else. And I think it is a mistake to make something that fits in every context. By necessity, it's going to be a compromised solution. Like if it's in the desert, you're going to have to be, probably cooling it all the time. And if it's in another one, you'll have to be heating it all the time. So it's like, it's just a bad compromise all around. Context is super important. And if you ignore it at your peril, I guess. People ask me all the time, would you build this in Wisconsin or wherever, and no, because this is where it belongs. Could probably do something similar, but you got to listen to the site. The site will tell you what you need to know.
So the house belongs to the place?
I believe.